Time now for EEI Late Night with KJ.
Here's how someone in the organization explained it to me. They said, we're going to do what we always do, explore every option. Could be the draft, could be free agency, could be trades. And they feel like they're in a good financial position with the salary cap, that if the right opportunity presents itself, that they can pounce. There is one other thought from those around this situation, that timing is important for them to get a quarterback for the start of free agency. So if they're out recruiting a top receiver or top tight end, that player knows who might be throwing them the football. So that aspect part of this conversation as well.
It means a lot. WEEI Late Night with KJ and part of the WEEI Radio Network. How you doing? Please stay safe on the roads tonight. It is not pretty. It means a lot. Bill Belichick, what's the second act? Tom's won the Super Bowl. We are now officially a whole week past that. As that famous soap opera says, like the sands of times, these are the days. Yes, someone has now turned over the sand timer. And that's an old way of telling time right there. It's like, once the sand goes through one side, it's an hour. With Bill, what's the second act? See, sometimes in life, we have to recreate ourselves. We can get a reputation. For mine, it's been in music. I've been in multiple cities. But sometimes you have to recreate yourself at the most uncomfortable time. That's where Bill Belichick is. So, Bill, you've had some really great examples of second acts that you've brought to New England. And maybe these can be inspirations for the second act that you have to create for the New England Patriots. Corey Dillon, that was a masterpiece right there. That is the guy who was not the Patriot way right before he got to the team. I can still see Corey Dillon draped in his Cincinnati, when they used to wear the big overcoats, on the sideline, just huffing and puffing. I'm not going to go in the game. I hate this organization. And yet that second act helped develop your first act. Or how about Randy Moss? Straight cash, homie. Meter maid loving. Just absolutely about to blow his career. Went to the Raiders and stunk it up. But you gave him a second act. Randy Moss is wearing the canary yellow jacket in the Hall of Fame because you gave him a second act. As Keith Richards says in the song, it means a lot. Bill, this is your chance to be an even bigger legend than you already are. I got to shout out my man Dylan. He's on the board tonight. And you think of some of the second acts that have come here. What about Junior Seau? They thought he was done in San Diego. Those second acts. It means a lot. How about Tom Brady? Well, you didn't give him a second act. We just saw his second act happen last week. Bill, you have to recreate yourself, the dynasty. Let's not even use the pressure of the word dynasty for the Patriots. If we ever thought, even with the Celtics, once Red left the team, it didn't miss a beat. Bill becomes the coach. They still have another run after that. Then it gets a little dicey for only a couple of years. So much so that Red spent capital and said, hey, we're going to draft this kid who still has another year left of college, and we'll let him go and stay there instead of being here. Oh, my gosh, you'd see some of the players that were drafted before Bird in the 78 draft. You tend to forget because Bird didn't get here till 79. You spend capital. It means a lot. That second act for the Celtics helped save the NBA. So when it comes to reconstructing the Patriots, it's not a rebuild. Let's not use that word. It's a rebuild. This is not Babylonian times. My Sunday school teacher would be so happy. Like, All those times you cut out and ran and grabbed candy. You paid attention. This is not someone going around the walls of Foxborough 7 times and seeing it drop to the ground. It's a 7-9 season. I hear all this talk about how fancy the Bills are and, wow, look out for Miami. Really? Yeah, they're good. But we have this saying. What do you call a person who's finished 3 years of college? Answer, a high school graduate. They haven't walked that stage yet. This is the time, Bill, to reinvent yourself. It means a lot. The fan base. Oh, you remember the threesome between Tony Eason and Steve Grogan and Mark Wilson and Doug Flutie watching on the side too? It means a lot. Ray Berry. Now, true story, Ray Berry's college quarterback was my best friend in high school's dad, a guy named Gary Quazzo. And so I was a Patriots fan in those early years because I would see pictures of Raymond Berry in Mr. Quazzo's house. So I know what it looks like when you've got 4 quarterbacks and it's ugly. And luckily you weren't here for that, Bill. With a 7-9 season, you can recreate yourself. A second act. It's like the Rolling Stones. I tend to be a little favoritism of I kind of favor them a little. But they have invented themselves at least 4 times. How do people pay thousands of dollars to go see people who have been performing for almost 70 years? It's because they recreated themselves. Bill has that ability. Now, what does it take? Maybe leaning on some more offensive minds? Maybe strictly being GM? Again, I mentioned that Red Auerbach turned the Celtics over to Bill Russell. And still, with all this argument of who's the greatest, the Bill Russell story seems to always sneak back in. You're like, wait a minute, this guy won 2 additional titles as the player coach? You got to bench somebody and go back out there and play? That's pretty impressive. But Bill knew it meant a lot to recreate himself. So maybe it's Josh McDaniels you put in the seat. I know this is going way out there. Do you make Josh McDaniels the head coach because it's the only place he really wants the head coach? He's not going to get hired anywhere else. In fact, probably all of his interviews are, so, do you think Bill's close to leaving? Nobody has sympathy for the Patriots in the league. If you've been dusting everybody and you've tried everything, the deflated balls is still the funniest thing I've ever heard. Wouldn't it be easier for a defense to catch a deflated ball than the offense? Bill, you change it up. Suddenly, this Tom versus Bill thing doesn't become as big of a deal. Mike Tannenbaum used to work with Bill on Get Up. Is potentially discussing a trap they may happen if you get Mac Jones.
Yeah, Coach Belichick is always going to think long term, and that's why I think it's going to be Mac Jones. And in my opinion, he's going to have to trade up above Carolina at 8 to go get Mac Jones. Matt Rule coached Mac Jones, the head coach of the Carolina Panthers, in the Senior Bowl. He loved him. I think the sweet spot to get Mac Jones is 7. And I worked for Coach Belichick twice, and one of his many superpowers, Greeny, is he doesn't care. He's dispassionate, and he's always going to think long term. So while the rest of us will think from a human nature standpoint, Brady won 1, there's a sense of urgency. He's always going to think long term, and Mac Jones gives him the best chance to win over and over again long term, and that's what I think they do.
Ha ha ha, I had to laugh, once famously said. Mac Jones is the setup. If he's that good, then how come other people who need quarterbacks aren't drafting him before the Patriots have to move up to get Mac Jones when everybody has him going down? So from about a week ago, at ProFootballNetwork.com, Ian Cummings kind of shared some of the draft notes of the player profile of Mac Jones. Because I'm like, I watched, because Alabama's on every week. They're on every week. I know my hearing is going bad because I've been wearing headphones over my head for 20 years, but my eyes tend to get better. They say the same thing. They say, don't ever whisper something around Stevie Wonder because he can hear it. His hearing's better than when you talk. But then when I saw these notes, it was like, wow. Beyond the Senior Bowl, they kept saying pedestrian. Pedestrian. Does that sound like first round 15 trade up ahead of Carolina, who already has a quarterback? It may not be the best quarterback in the world, but we're going to move ahead of Carolina to get a guy whose notes consistently said pedestrian? It gets worse. The conclusion they come about with Mac Jones, and I've come to it too, is, did you ever see Mac Jones come from behind? You know why? He's got the best people in the world on his team. Oh, yeah, that's what's going on in New England, right? Oh, man, the receivers, they've caught 80 balls this year in practice. Oh, man, I'm telling you, man, the tight ends, when they come across the seam and they catch these balls in warm-ups, and you're going to risk the 15th pick, and Tannenbaum says, hey, actually move up ahead so you could go get him. What? Bill, recreate yourself. It means a lot. You may hear, or you may have heard this term a lot over the last few weeks, several months. The term is free speech. Now, don't slam on your brakes because, again, it is some ice out there. But I don't go political. But the court said that money is free speech. So, Bill, man, start talking like a drunken sailor with that $70 million cap. Don't play around with some quarterback that never was challenged in college. I could even say, hey, if he was playing under center, like directly, not playing out of the shotgun like every college quarterback does. But trade up to go get Mac Jones? That's absolutely crazy. It's KJ Late Night on WEEI. 617-779-7937 or 37937. Still to come. The Celtics, maybe the store has come open? That's in a few. Back to the quarterback situation with the Patriots. So Mike Reese was on Dale and Keefe, and he's kind of liking the idea of the Patriots trading for Mariota.
But is there also the risk, Mike, if you don't commit and you don't have an aggressive plan, then maybe you're left like last year and you're kind of settling for whatever is left available? And I would say certainly the facts might back up your point. If the reports that they only offered a 2 for Matthew Stafford are true, that would be less than aggressive. But is there a concern if you're not aggressive? Well, then all the musical chairs are filled and you don't have a quarterback?
There is, Andy, and I think that's sort of exactly the dilemma, to use the word, that they're in, is when do you push and when do you pull? And I'm just going to throw this scenario out there, and I'll touch on it a little bit in a piece that's coming up. It's sort of, Andy, why I like the possibility, or I'm warming up to the possibility of someone like Marcus Mariota, the Raiders' backup quarterback, which they might not keep because they're in a little bit of a salary cap crunch. They need to improve their defense. He's on the books for about $10.5 million. Like, I'm warming up to the idea of maybe you just take care of that right now. Say, hey, what would it take? Would it take a 5th-round pick, a 6th-round pick? You might even cut him. Let's take him and let's just say we can move forward with him, and then it still gives us flexibility whether he's the guy or not. At least we have a guy that has 61 career starts, gives us a chance at a functional passing game, and maybe he ends up being the answer down the line. But if he isn't, we still have flexibility with all that cap space to move in another direction.
The New England Patriots are worth $4.1 billion. And I hear a bunch of shoulders tucked in about who the next quarterback is. Maybe it's Mariota. It's people are feeling like there's buyer's remorse because Matt Stafford didn't come. I was kind of like, all right, Bill, you might be onto the second act thing. You cannot play around. So there are 3 categories, Dylan, of what type of effort Bill is going to put into when it comes to the quarterback situation for the New England Patriots. The 3 categories are half-assed, so-so, and claim the throne like it's the last season of Game of Thrones. That's just how we just got to cut it down to. So, Dylan, here are the half-ass efforts. Cam Newton, Andy Dalton, Blake Bortles.
Cam Newton, I almost feel, is no effort.
That's half-assed. You know what the other side of half-assed is? Half-assed. 1 half-ass plus 2. Another half is a whole. I'm not going to say a whole, but, you know, W-H-O-L-E, whole. This will show that Bill's power is still more important than performance. Remember, Red Auerbach drafted Larry Bird and let him go finish another year of college to close that gap of what was about to come down the pike, and it wasn't pretty. There were pieces there, but it wasn't going to be pretty. He spent that capital. Those guys, they're the only free agents who would come if you get a Blake Bortles or keep Cam or go get Andy Dalton. The only free agents that come here are the ones that can't go anywhere else. I heard about that football league that Johnny Manziel is that they don't want you. Okay, I'll go to the Patriots. Come on.
FC Zappers.
We may be the Zappers. You know, like if they get like EPL and you go half-assed on a quarterback, they're going to introduce relegation football. Like, will the Patriots end up in the fans call the plays league and they move up? I bet you it would step some people up. Here's a so-so effort, and it's going to bother some, but that's perfectly fine. I had to do the homework. You got to eat dinner. Jimmy G, a Mariota trade, and Mitch Trubisky. So-so. Jimmy, you got a year and a half to get it right. You really only have a half season to get it right, because if Jimmy comes out of the gate and he comes here and he's 2-4, you thought that ride to the North End was a warning? Ugh. The Mariota trade, you just heard about it. It's almost kind of like this. Lord, forgive me for telling this story, but it's absolutely true. At some point, you don't marry the girl who still has the tongue ring in their mouth when they're over 40. This is going to be mom. This is going to be picking up from school. And you're thinking, like, so what does mom do again? Now, it may be part of her personality. It doesn't necessarily say something about her. But if nobody else has been marrying or choosing her, why would you choose her yourself? That's Marcus Mariota. And why would the Patriots, the second most valuable franchise in the league, where winning is tied to its value, different from the Cowboys? The Cowboys always sneeze out a bad team. They're only built to win one game in the playoffs. It's literally like the TV show Dallas. Who shot JR? When did the Cowboys get eliminated? It's all the same. That's not the situation with the Patriots. You're talking about a franchise that was in the doldrums and is now the second most valuable franchise in football. So you don't go get Marcus Mariota and say, well, maybe it'll work out. You're Bill Belichick. You're supposed to be the Svengali of head football coaches. It can't be a so-so decision. Mitch Trubisky, I'll give a little more of a pass. Why? He's still relatively young. He hasn't been injured. He's just been mentally scarred, and he didn't go out like Carson Wentz did saying, you got the baby effect? My man, Dylan. You don't have a crying baby at $34 million with Mitch Trubisky. So if you want to go so-so and spend a little dough, Bill, Trubisky may be your guy. You know, his valuation of his deal should be about $8 million a year. If you say, hey, okay, we give him $12 million a year, that kind of fits into your logic of not spending. And maybe there's some upside. He's got a strong arm. He's mobile. Maybe Josh McDaniels can get into that head and shape a quarterback. That's why he's on the line of so-so, where I think a better choice than Jimmy G, because I don't know, Jimmy G slipped once, sneezed twice. I'm not even going to do the porn star joke, right? Because everybody's suffering COVID, right? So it just could be a financial and disastrous problem with Jimmy with one good hit. And then there's the claim the throne list. And this is why I say, just the same way that Red Auerbach said, look, my first round pick, he won't even be here this year. Bill, that's the $70 million in your hand. Get on the phone about Deshaun Watson. While you keep hearing these stories, he's not going to be moved, he's not going to be moved, he's not going to be moved, it's not going to be moved. That's like a kid waiting for Santa Claus. You may be Santa Claus coming to town. You have a relationship with, I know, it's like, why would Nick Caserio, why wouldn't he? You don't think they called you, Bill, about whether Nick would be the right guy for that culture down there with Pastor Jack and Crazy Cal? I get it. And guess what? It may not require as much as you think. The universe sometimes works that way. You hear all these stories. Oh, they're trying to give up like 85 million people and their first round picks for the next 30 years. You may not have to do that. All you have to do is just consistently call. Derek Carr. Now, that's a surprise name, but it's a young, mobile quarterback who could get the ball downfield. And in his 8 wins this year, 5 of them came off of his arm.
You have Derek Carr and Watson would be like the same level of impact for this team.
Yes, if you're looking at the big picture, right? Because this is not a 1 or 2 year fix. Remember, when you got Bird by 1981, you had a championship again.
Wow.
Now, if you looked at, was that me? No, that was somebody else. I was like, wow, how did you make my voice do that, Dylan? That's how you can have a turnaround that fast. Last one, Russell Wilson. These 3 quarterbacks, and I take a risk there on Derek Carr. I'm not saying he's at the level of a Deshaun Watson or a Russell Wilson.
He's definitely the most attainable.
Right. So it's how you have to think of things. Like when you go to the prom, like when I remember I went to like my 8th grade prom, and I was like, okay, Erica, what are you going to wear? What am I going to wear? Okay, what are you going to wear? And then when you get there, it becomes even harder to ask. But sometimes all you have to do is ask, and ye shall receive. Now with Derek Carr, you're probably going to have to give up everything, everything that they possibly want. But do you want this team to be mediocre? The Mark Wilson, Steve Grogan, Tony Eason with Doug Flutie kind of sneaking in there as well. Jimmy might like something like that. That's 4 quarterbacks. It might be Jimmy Garoppolo's speed, but 4 quarterbacks in the room. Bow, chicka, pow, pow. No, we don't have. The Patriots don't have time for that. 617-779-7937. It's KJ Late Night on WEEI. Coming up, what are the Celtics going to do? Plus, a lot of quarterbacks are being compared to NBA players and what Tom did in Tampa Bay. I think the analogy is a bit off. We'll talk about that next here on WEEI.